Florida Behavioral Health Clinic. Welcome, both of you, to Signal 94.
Thank you for having me, Harry.
Scott, what petitions are being circulated to get a question on the ballot to amend the Florida Constitution? Saying what, basically?
We have a medical marijuana ballot initiative, and that is just basically to get the issue on the ballot. And the issue they're going to be voting on is whether doctors and patients can be free from criminal prosecution for using marijuana for various medical maladies that it is generally accepted for.
And why is that a good idea?
That's a good idea because there are thousands of people in Florida who are now suffering from AIDS, glaucoma, and multiple sclerosis that can benefit from using marijuana. And if they're free from fearing persecution, they can do so in the privacy of their own home, and they can also benefit from the substance without that fear.
And Drew, you would urge people not to sign the petition. You think this is a bad idea. Why?
I've been working with substance abusers and their families and children for over 20 years, and I've just seen through my own personal experience in treating and see what marijuana abuse and dependency does to individuals and their families. Plus, the question of medical use has not been studied, and the advocates for medical use resist scientific study into developing a medication for treatment of specific maladies, as Scott said. And any medicine that's approved by the FDA has to go through procedures to make sure that it's safe. The question we have and we should ask is, what are the negative or undesired effects of this potential medicine? And there are many, and we have to be very careful.
Florida is not the first state to do this. We have some experience, I guess, some initial experience from California and Arizona. Mm-hmm. What do you hear from those states?
It was I think a very well-financed campaign by a lot of individuals. Scott and I were talking earlier. He knows more about the campaign than I did, but they basically convinced the voters that this should be basically a freedom of choice issue, that people should be able to get marijuana. And I think, and you look at some of the study, for example, from from Columbia University, that America is now glamorizing drug use. After the 80s, after all the advances we made, we're losing ground. And my concern is that the American popular culture is now re-glamorizing drugs. And that's indicated by the increase of marijuana use among young people. I have a graph here that we could look at that shows marijuana use among high school students. And you look at the increases from 91 through 96, and you see dramatic increases where 45% of high school seniors are now smoking marijuana, 35% of 10th graders, and almost 25% of 8th graders began smoking marijuana, and that's gone up steadily since 1992, in lockstep with, I think, the movement for legalization and the movement of re-glamorizing drug use.
Scott, clearly one of the concerns is that this is, in effect, a backdoor approach to legalizing marijuana, if not some other things.
Yes, sir, I do understand that fear, and as I explained to Drew earlier, we don't hide that our organization, Cannabis Action Network, doesn't hide that we are advocating the legalization of marijuana overall. However, we are helping another organization, which is the Coalition Advocating Medical Marijuana, to get this initiative on the ballot for medical purposes. Our reason for doing that is we believe that once the government has to recognize the facts that are involved with marijuana, not the rhetoric and the propaganda, that they will clearly no longer have a leg to stand on as far as keeping marijuana illegal for industrial use and personal private use by adults in their own homes.
So you take issue with Drew's assertion that the medical benefits have not been established?
Well, they clearly have been established. In 1988, the DEA's own administrative law judge, Francis Young, cited 8 pages of factual information concerning the beneficial uses of medicinal marijuana. And it's clearly not been proven that marijuana is addictive or has health risks. The studies that they most frequently cite are the ones in 1976 from Gabriel Nahas, and he was fired from the National Institute of Health and rebuked his own data.
Drew?
Well, there's lots of new data out. First, let me give you a quote here from Richard Cohen. He's the director of NORML, the organization to legalize marijuana. He said in 1993, the key to full legalization is medical access, because once you have hundreds of thousands of people using marijuana medically under medical supervision, the whole scam is going to be blown. So clearly the strategy is to get the foot in the door with medical marijuana, and I commend Scott for his honesty about legalization. That's where this is going.
But you're not so sure that the medical benefits have been established, but moreover, is there another way, the synthetic method of providing?
There's a drug called Marinol, which is a synthetic THC, and most of the people who smoke marijuana don't like it because it really doesn't give you the bolus effect. And anytime you smoke a drug, it's similar to injecting a drug. You get a high concentrated dose to the pleasure center of the brain very, very quickly. Hundreds of studies have been done in the last 6 or 7 years about marijuana and what it does, and it is an addictive drug. That has been proven. It's lipid soluble, meaning it's slowly absorbed and slowly released from the body, as opposed to alcohol and cocaine. So it's difficult to compare because the nature of the substance is different. If you look at my second slide here, I can show you a couple things about marijuana and the brain and some of the new things that we know. While we're getting that up, I can tell you that almost 140,000 people sought treatment for marijuana dependency in 1994. They just didn't, they had problems with marijuana and sought treatment for it that they couldn't stop by themselves. So that's an indicator. The slide shows a sagittal view of the brain, a half view of the brain, and those pink-colored dots are what we discovered in 1992 as receptor sites for cannabinoids. We did not know they existed before the early 90s, late 80s. The dark center the dark line in the middle, the purple line, shows the reward pathway. All drugs of abuse hit that reward pathway. Alcohol, cocaine, nicotine, and now we've established that marijuana travels along the reward pathway and increases a drug called dopamine in the brain, which is highly rewarding and the key to all addiction. Marijuana does the same thing, the same mechanism. If you look at the dots in the lower right portion of the brain, you see the cerebellum, that's coordination. You see judgment is affected. And these are all the things you see anecdotally when people come into treatment. And the studies show that people who are stoned have problems with coordination. Their judgment is impaired. The movement is impaired, and particularly the memory. And that's the most scary thing when you talk about 8th graders smoking, is the impairment on short-term memory, which is now substantiated and medically documented that marijuana impairs memory.
Okay, Scott, I'm going to give you a chance to respond after we take a break.
Okay.
We'll be right back with our debate on the legalization of marijuana for medicinal purposes.
You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say is going to be used against you in court. You have the right to talk to the lawyer for advice.
1122, can I?
All rise.
The state of Florida versus
Order! Order!
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty, guilty, guilty.
Welcome back. You're watching Signal 94, a debate on the question of legalizing marijuana for medicinal purposes. Scott, you wanted to say something?
Well, yes. I take a couple of issues that Drew mentioned. We do not advocate the legalization or the use of marijuana by people who are under the age of 18 or 21. However, we do admit there should be some controls and that adults should only be using it. However, the facts, they remain clear that right now we have no control over who has access to marijuana at all. The people who are selling it do not care who they sell it to. So we have no controls. If we do have some regulated way to legalize and decriminalize marijuana, there would be a way to distribute it, and there would be some control over who does have access to it and who doesn't. Like I said, currently in the black market, there is no control. And I feel, and there's a lot of people who feel that some control is better than no control.
What about attaining the actual ingredient, active ingredient of marijuana through marinol?
Oh, well, marinol is a synthetic copy of THC, and it doesn't work as fast. It takes a long time for the effects to come on to the patients, for the beneficial substance, I mean the beneficial effects that they get out of the substance.
But unlike other kinds of medicine that you might take, wouldn't there be some doubt in your mind about the quality and the strength of what you were administering?
Well, marijuana, there are ways to determine what the potency of your marijuana that you have is. There are different grades of marijuana, and you can go to Oxford, Mississippi, and they're growing different varieties there that have different potencies. I mean, and in that way, you would have the patient regulating how much of a dose they would need. You could tell by the physiological effects on your body, you can feel the effects, and when you've had enough, you know you've had enough.
Marijuana is very slow-acting, and the dose is hard to control. Experienced users have a certain dealer they buy it from, and they know the quality. But I'm going to go back to the young people thing in your comment. You know, we have laws and regulate alcohol and nicotine, and the use among 8th graders is skyrocketing with alcohol and nicotine, two legal drugs that
we're not doing a very good job of controlling access.
And one of a couple of the issues that, facts, this is from Columbia University. We know that the age of first use of marijuana is also going down. It's somewhere around 11 years old now, and it's going further down. So access now is a problem. Parental involvement has a lot to do with that. That's not the problem of the drug dealer. These kids are wanting marijuana, but that has to do with glamorize. A couple of facts. Teens who smoke pot are 85 times more likely to use cocaine. 85 times more likely.
That's the gateway concept, right?
60% of kids who smoke pot before the age of 15 will use cocaine.
Are you concerned about the gateway aspect?
The National Academy of Sciences has clearly stated that the use of illicit drugs such as caffeine, alcohol, and tobacco precede the use of all illicit drugs. And the factoring in of marijuana comes in because it is on the black market. Once you're exposed to getting marijuana through the underground world, once you're exposed to that, the people who are dealing in those kinds of things also have access to other drugs, and they certainly want to get you on those drugs because those are more expensive and they will be making more money. It's an economic factor, and it's not to be blamed on marijuana. It's to be blamed on the laws that make marijuana illegal.
Scott, the AMA and the FMA, the medical organization, oppose this.
The American Medical Association does not oppose medical access to patients who want to receive marijuana. They are calling for the government to release the supply of marijuana so that we can get accurate new research on this, and that we can have facts to go from instead of the old research studies. And many times we have opinions infused within the research studies. And they are, in 1995, in the Journal of the American Medical Association, they clearly spoke out for the government to release the supply so they can do the research.
I agree that any drug we're going to prescribe, physicians have responsibility to know the effect and be able to control the dose, and we can't do that with smokable marijuana. Well, there's no other drug we smoke. We give people drugs derived from plants every day, but we have them dosed and controlled. For example, we use morphine, which is a synthetic heroin. We don't give people poppy plants. We don't do that because we can't control it. We could kill somebody if we did it. So I'm in favor of testing and seeing what. Clearly, there are effects from the brain slide I showed you. Clearly, marijuana does some things to the brain that has a medical potential. It has an analgesic capability. We know all this, and I am in total agreement. It should be researched and studied, but we have to go through the FDA approval.
When would this be on the ballot?
Year 2000.
And you're saying that at this point we don't know enough about it to cast an intelligent vote?
I think we know plenty about it to say no, absolutely not.
So at this point you'd vote no, but at some point in the future, given sufficient evidence.
Oh, sure.
you might vote yes.
It's scary. And again, anecdotally, I've seen 1,000 people who've come to me because they're abusing marijuana, and I've seen when it's done to their lives, and I've seen when it's done to their families. And one of the interesting things about marijuana is you're impaired long after you realize you're impaired. Let me tell you one study. They did an airline pilot study. They got pilots stoned. And then they asked them every 30 minutes, could you fly the plane? And for 4 or 5 hours, they said, no, we're stoned. But after that, they sobered up. 24 hours later, they put them in a simulator. Most of them crashed. Marijuana had affected their perceptions of their abilities and their judgment at least 24 hours after they were stoned.
Not unlike another famous drug that we deal with every day.
Absolutely. Well, no, alcohol is, if you're drunk, people know you're drunk, and if you showed at work drunk, 24 hours later, no one would notice and you could do your job. Marijuana, the user doesn't even know they're impaired, and that's the danger of that drug.
What I would question in that study, I'm aware of that study, is that there was no control group. There could have been something going on in the pilot's lives. Their girlfriend could have broke up with them. They could have had emotional traumas going on besides this experiment. And how I would say to that is there are other things that are available on the market that would do that to them as well. I would not get on a plane with a pilot who had drank 19 cups of coffee before I got on the plane.
You do every day.
That's clearly dangerous because 19 cups of coffee, the caffeine would have a far worse effect than any marijuana could ever have.
Absolutely not. There's no evidence of that.
However, I would not want the pilot, of course, to be stoned. But, however, in the privacy of his own home, when he doesn't have people's lives in his hands, there should be no laws against somebody doing that when they're not going to be putting anybody else's safety into question.
The point is they did have controls. They had a control group, and they did fine on the test. And if pilots crashed airplanes because they were emotionally upset about their girlfriend, we'd have crashes every day, and we don't. There was another study. 400 cannabis users were studied for 10 years, and they'd used anywhere from 6 weeks to 10 years of regular use, and they had difficulty in analytical skills, sorting information, concentration, difficulty differentiating time and space. And these deficits were found in individuals who used only every couple of weeks, but used for at least 2 years. So my point of this is not to say we got to study this drug. It has a lot. It could have good medical benefit, but right now the negative consequences to me far outweigh it, because this is if you're impaired and you don't know it, you're dangerous.
Well, I agree, but clearly even you, Drew, admit there could be some beneficial effects from marijuana. And given that, shouldn't we not have the laws against it until we're sure that it is devastating to our health and our environment? Why are we going ahead and making marijuana guilty before it's proven innocent? Why not have it innocent before it's proven guilty?
Just like cocaine or anything else. We know, we see what it does to people, and we say, this is not a good thing to prescribe.
Well, in a lot of situations, you say you've had 140,000 people that get treatment for marijuana abuse. A lot of times, an adolescent who is fearing prosecution from or being thrown in treatment for drugs will a lot of times, under the pressure of his parents, admit to being on marijuana when they're really doing other heavier drugs, and they don't want to admit to that.
Okay, we're going to take a break, and we'll come back and continue our discussion in a moment.
What you have just seen, drivers failing to yield to emergency vehicles, happens every day in Jacksonville. When you hear a siren, do you know what to do? Florida law says yield quickly and safely to the nearest curb.
Remember, we can't help you unless you let us through.
Say yes and yield to emergency services.
Welcome back. You're watching Signal 94, discussing marijuana tonight, and we have Scott Bledsoe and Drew Edwards with us. What would happen in your opinion, if Florida voters said yes on this amendment to legalize marijuana for medicinal purposes?
Well, then we could provide a system where we could allow medical patients who would benefit from receiving marijuana access to receiving that without fear of persecution.
And I could raise a crop of marijuana in my backyard for my own purposes?
If you were so
this would legalize the cultivation, distribution, and sale, right?
Only for people who are registered to provide the marijuana to the distributors who are going to be giving that marijuana out. You would have to be registered from the government, and you would be taxed and regulated.
Mm-hmm. What would happen, in your opinion?
I think you'd see the similar thing you see with the legal drugs, alcohol and nicotine. You'd see skyrocketing problems with it. You know, if you look at deaths from alcohol, you're looking at 150,000 a year, and deaths from nicotine, 450,000 a year. And all the illegal drugs, you don't have direct death, but once you legalize a drug, you create access. And I differ with Scott there. We have an epidemic of alcohol abuse among teenagers. There is no reason to suspect it wouldn't be any different with marijuana.
Well, marijuana was legal for 4,965 years, or prior to right now, in the United States and everywhere around the world. And they didn't have anybody die from marijuana. You cannot find one death attributable to the use of marijuana. It doesn't happen. Its toxicity is non-existent almost. I mean, you'd have to take 40,000 doses of marijuana to die from an overdose. That's clearly proven by the FDA in their own research. They have also proven that marijuana use reduces the size and amount of tumors in laboratory rats. And you can order that study from the National Institute of Health. I can give you the phone number.
They don't smoke it.
But we know tobacco smoke is dangerous. That's pretty well accepted, except by the tobacco industry.
Yeah, we have this big push to get everyone to quit smoking because of all the damage smoke and tar and all that does to
So isn't marijuana smoke dangerous?
Marijuana is much worse, puff for puff. And the fact, you know how people smoke marijuana. They hold it in their lungs for 5-10 seconds to get all the psychoactive ingredients absorbed. You get 4 times more tar than cigarettes in marijuana. You get 50% more carcinogenic hydrocarbons. You hurt your immune system. So this thing about smoking marijuana for AIDS is a lie, because you destroy the macrophages which destroy infections in the lung with marijuana smoke. So it's going to compromise the immune system more than it would help it. And you've had even people from smoking marijuana where they've had a collapsed lung from holding it in so long. I mean, so you do have medical problems. And smoking a drug is an efficient way to get a psychoactive ingredient to the brain, but it's harmful to smoke the drug.
And I would agree with there are some harmful effects from smoking. However, marijuana does not have to be smoked to be effective. It can be inhaled, vaporized. They have vaporizer machines out now which vaporize the oils in the cannabis plant without the harmful effects of smoking it. So that is an issue, but it can be avoided by inhaling it through vaporizers. It can be boiled into teas.
But couldn't I go down to my Walgreens or Eckerd's and buy that rather than, I mean, if it's going to be available with an inhaler?
Certainly.
I mean, but why legalize it in terms of the existing method of smoking?
Well, yeah, I mean, we're not trying to get it just to be smoked. We do want the plant itself legalized. We are outlawing a plant that occurs naturally, and to me, just on the surface, that sounds like we're putting our laws above something that naturally occurs here. And
cocaine occurs naturally.
Yes, but marijuana does not have to be processed by any man-made processes. It can be used as it comes straight out of the ground. And it can be used not only for medicinal or psychoactive effects. The industrial uses could make millions of dollars for farmers in this country who have no other means of supporting themselves currently.
Which raises a question I wanted to ask you. Who's behind this? Is there any moneyed interest supporting this kind of legislation?
Well, our organization right now and the petition drive here in Florida is receiving money from the Drug Policy Foundation in Washington, D.C. They are a lobbying organization, and they are currently funding us. However, there are the president of Progressive Insurance. He is behind and a big funder of various state initiatives as we are doing now. And so there clearly is money involved, and we'd like to get some, but we're getting some now. We'd like to get more.
Is there a vested interest that may have a stake in this?
The big money for the foundation is George Soros. He's a billionaire, and he's been funding a lot of. He put a couple million into these legislations in Arizona and California. He stands to be the one selling the marijuana, and he stands to make a lot of money doing this, and that's a concern. But that's a political issue, and that's not my issue. My issue is medical safety and what happens to people who use it.
Running out of time, so I want to give you each a little time to kind of wrap up and give it your best shot. Why you think voters should first sign the petition and then vote yes on this?
Well, I don't want them to take my word for it. I want them to go ahead and do the research that they can find about marijuana at the library, in the encyclopedia, on the internet, anywhere they can find it. Make sure it's facts, and go and find out and do the research. Find out why marijuana was criminalized in the first place in 1937. Once they go and delve into this research, I believe that they can be able to make their own decisions, and that they will make a decision to support the legalization of marijuana for medicinal use. Now, if they sign our petition only gets it on the ballot so that Floridians can decide for themselves instead of having the government decide. And what better way to exercise our democracy than that?
Does the petition specify particular types of medicinal use, or can I
Yes, it does.
try to get it for
It does specify.
Charlie Horse?
It says that a doctor, there will be a list, when it goes to the Supreme Court, when we have 40,000 signatures, there will be a list of ailments, a specific concrete list of ailments that you must have to be eligible to receive the marijuana under this statute.
Drew, your closing statement.
Marijuana is an addictive drug associated with numerous physical consequences, and probably if you compare it directly to, as I said, it's a different in solubility. Probably the most dangerous aspect of marijuana is in the subtlety of the symptoms. The biggest heartbreak for me in treating a marijuana patient is looking at their children or their family and having a 10-year-old girl to me say, "Daddy comes home every night, goes to the garage, smokes his pot, sits in his chair, and doesn't do anything." And that's sort of what scares me about marijuana, that it doesn't turn you into a crazed criminal like we see about cocaine, but it does some very subtle things. The more you love someone who smokes pot, the more you get her. And I've seen families and children devastated by this drug. And I'm very much against it.
Drew Edwards, Scott Bledsoe, thank you for being with us on Signal 94.
Thanks for having me.
That's all the time we have tonight. Hope you'll be back with us next Thursday night at 8:30. We'll be focusing on Zone 4 with a live show. So long, everyone.